name's Neil Rodgers. I'm the Digital Solutions Director of Helia, and I'll be presenting this with Miles, the co-founder from Sooner, Safer, Happier, that some of you may know. And so what we're going to do is give a story about Helia, where we've been on our Agile journey and how we kind of incorporated lean control, which for us, you might see in this referencing as Agile governance. The way we've phrased it in our company is it's the Agile governance framework. And so that's how we reference it. I know in the book it references lean control. So that's it. The key of today, I think, is really for us how we'll measure success today in this meetup. Right? That's how I always look at things about measurements. Is fundamentally that there's comments in the chats and there's questions. So there's a lot of time at the end for questions. So please ask questions. If we know you've questioning things, debating something, it's this really good sign. So you take one thing away, 1 hour of your time, one thing that you try and implement, at least tomorrow onwards, I think will be a good success. And the last one is about growing your network. I will explain on a slide why the network will be important if you do look at this or any other aspects that we talk about today as we go through it. So the other measures that I'll try hold us to if this is a successful meetup. So as Maria said, I'm doing Acknowledgement country. So I'm in the west of Sydney, and so that's the Wango clan, one of the 29 tribes of the Eora Nation. And our Diversity Council at Helia always asks us to humanise what this acknowledgement of country means. And so there's a picture here of one of my children's school, and they talk about the Indigenous stories, the history of traditional owners, as well as modern Australia, and the art, and they incorporate all of that into how they do it. And I really love that because it's that acknowledgement of our children will be how successful we understand and recognise our traditional owners as well as modern Australia to make it a really successful, continue the successful country that it is. So that's my acknowledgement. Legal, I've asked that we make sure there's 2 legal slides here. It's generic. I'm going to make references to companies. I'm going to be as open as transparent as you want me to be. So do please note that these are some of my opinions and names, not Helia does not have any third-party endorsements. Don't really understand what that means, but legal set up to do it, okay? What was our reason for change? What did we do? Well, if you don't know who Helia is a lender's mortgage insurance provider. We're a really small company, about 250 people, been going on for about 70 years. Lender's mortgage insurance is when your credit risk policy of a bank, you're trying to buy a home, you're trying to get a mortgage, and you don't meet the credit risk criteria. At that point there, you have an opportunity to use LMI. And so that bank will then pass that LMI to us, and we will insure the lender. Our reason for change is that the residential lending system, the mortgages system, is very, very complex. You can, it's sold to a lender, but it relates to different people. It could be sold by a broker. All of a sudden, we're a B2B company that all of a sudden can become a B2B to B2C. It's so complex there. So who is a customer? Is it the middle broker? Is it the person that we're selling it to? Is it the end? It gets really complex, really easy. And our product offering is quite niche and quite small in the financial services industry. And so the ecosystem that we operate in means a lot of the out-of-the-box systems, really, they're kind of really, really difficult for us to utilize. They're either too brilliant because they're great for these big financial services, or too small and niche, which aren't so great in APRA and financial services regulated entities. And so we were never quite getting there. And it was constantly, we weren't getting the maximum value out of our technology stack, ultimately. Now, that meant that fundamentally we were very safe. We would do things in small iterative patterns. we had long test cycles. We would small change windows. We would have lots of customizations without the boxes or custom tools that were from 2010 and really old with people that are no longer there. But it was safe. We were always available. It followed Agile kind of mentality of a reliable and operational and available. But as we said to ourselves, where are we going as an organization? Is safe and reliable what our tech stack should be about? And to deliver the company strategy, it was kind of different. It was really, we needed to move quicker. The engagement and the divide between the business and tech had to come together. We had to ensure that we were one coherent team moving fast and still safe. We couldn't just drop it and say we're now going quick. So the journey we went down is an agile transformation. We didn't call it an agile transformation. Our agile coaches hated that because we felt agile I don't know if any of you come from big companies, but a lot of these big companies, they say, are you agile capital A or agile little a? You know, you get those little statements thrown in there. And so we didn't want to reference that is the thing. We were definitely going agile, and we had no mission to hide Scrum Masters and things, but we didn't want that to be the big visible element. And so we went down an agile cultural concepts of there. We really said we love cloud. So we introduced Appian, a low-code platform, and we've been experimenting with AWS. And we said, those two are your friends. If you see those two clouds, fall in love with them. So if you've got a right culture, an agile culture, and then a right cloud technology environment that we can build in, and throw in the last element of long-lived teams. And for us, we love team topology, the book, what it was doing. The value stream things that we've debated quite heavily, and we have gone down a slightly different journey. Our journey has been, we want to introduce, I think something that's called DevOps or DevOps 2.0, where we have the business, the end users internally in the same squads as well. And that squad, therefore, is a mixture of operational people, development technologists, as well as IT run partners. That's our big drive. Our logic behind this, as we come to, is the greater you pull together IP, that team topology concept, the better. And so everything we want to do is morph them all into to one team. And we're still on a long, long way to go to get in our journey. But it is, we want to go one step further than value or product aligned teams. We actually want product teams and just being this kind of one team concept. What we then were left with was basically this kind of concept of what did it mean to us? What did Agile look like? And we ultimately said it had to be more than culture. It had to be more than kind of getting in Scrum Masters and stand-ups and things. It had to rip into organizational process. There's one bank that we worked quite closely with, and they said they were an Agile team and they were an Agile delivery model, and it was great. They aligned with us. But the first 6 weeks was spent with BAs and an architectural review board. And once that architectural review board approved things, then the Agile team would be allowed to touch it. And the Agile team would then deliver some stuff, and then it would be passed to the standard regressional test team, who would then pass it to get it into a release window by the service management team. Now, they might fully well say that they are Agile, and they are, right? But they are as Agile as the operational processes allow them to be. If you still have an organizational architectural review board, a change advisory board, a separate test team, a separate service management team, if you have PMOs, project managers in the background running steer codes, if you have any of that organizational process, it didn't meet what we felt was actually Agile as we understood it. We wanted these long-lived teams that completely had all of it. So because we're small, we turned what we thought was our disadvantage to our advantage. We end up with 5 squads. These 5 squads, we could ring fence 1 or 2 leaders around them and kind of incubate's the wrong one because they delivered and they owned, but they really guarded them. And then ripped out all those processes. Anything that required any of that, they disappeared. And we very much then said, over to you. And they were saying, well, what's the release windows? Up to you. It's your roadmap. What's the definition? Up to you. You own it. And because our small nature, our nicheness became our strength, and that was what was so fantastic. And I really reckon if you go down a lean governance concept, you're going to be challenged with this one key point here. Are you going to rip away those organizational processes, or are you going to have Agile constrained by those processes, and you'll be as agile as they allow you? And then hopefully over time, you'll eat some of those Agile processes till you become fully Agile, as I would think of it in our example. And I'll leave that to you to decide what your best strategy. We felt our size allowed us to take them away, ring fence the people around, so people like myself and a few others can protect them. So if we saw something that was not going to be okay or would not be okay in front of a legal person, we were there to help ensure that they were on the right path. As soon as we did this, all of a sudden, boom, it was phenomenal. The pace that we went at was quite scary. Like, you can just go, as soon as you say Agile culture, strong support, and ripping away processes to allow them to be Agile. You have the testers in the team, the release management in the team. If you have all of that built up, the pace you can achieve is unbelievable. We were delivering APIs to every quarter. We were going through MVPs of claims systems, underwriting systems in just over 1 quarter. We were just consistently going so quick. A procurement activity to do a market scan would say take 8 to 12 weeks. We were quick start and building apps inside 4 and 5. It was phenomenal. As soon as you have that culture and that process liberation, then what you can achieve is phenomenal. But you then will be constrained by a few little things that you've got to make sure you understand. We've changed our definition of pace. Initially, it was how quick can you get to MVP? How quick can you go? But actually, what we now learn is that if you don't have your test automation running at the same speed as your functional build, you're going to pay for it post MVP. If you don't have your CI/CD pipelines built for quick build concepts, you're going to pay for it post MVP. And so all of a sudden, our learnings from the last really year and a half, has been actually pace is not MVP and how quickly you can get in those examples. It's how quickly you will be the day after and the day after and the day after. And so that was a really important learning for us. And how we learned that was our very first MVP didn't have the test automation and pipelines and an operational readiness plan, materials and guidelines all developed. The next quarter, they were in catch-up mode. With our underwriting platform, we could learn that, and it meant that we were on always at the same time. And what it meant was MVP the next day, they could carry on and keep growing. And that pace was really strong for them, maintained. And so I think it's really important that you think about that what does definition of pace actually mean to you? Because we went through a big learning journey on that. Our other big learning journey was really pace and value aren't the same thing. God, I'm sure that sounds the most obvious thing ever, but I tell you, pace is the most addictive thing ever. When you go from being a kind of ITIL shop where you're safe, reliable, operational, you're doing small changes to going quickly, you want to then keep delivering. And if your other squads are delivering things every sprint, you want to do that too. And you sometimes, and we're very lucky that our people never cut corners. So it was never about cutting corners, but it basically was said, how can I then deliver something that was really small, that was in line with all the other ones that were super quick? And actually, value stopped being a bit of a priority in that initial wave because pace was the thing. That is very addictive, pace. And we've had to then go through a learning pathway on actually value, pace, go slow to go fast with test automation, how important all of those aspects are. And you can't just do that. And your pace will be defined by how you define it, but it will also be defined by your organizational processes. And so we wanted to allow people as much pace as possible, which is why lean control has become an important aspect to our model going forward. The next big thing we introduced was the pitching process. So we've got about 31, 32 people here. Can I get a quick post in the chat and Miles, Maria, can you tell us how many people are you familiar with the Shark Tank pitching process where people are in there? Do you use it? Is it something you use in your organization? So pitching up, standing up and doing a pitch in front of your peers, a Shark Tank kind of concept. Is that a concept you're utilizing? See it in the chat itself. Okay, so we've got aware, not utilizing, understanding. Okay, aware, relatively. Okay. So what it is we have a very simple Miro board, a one-page canvas, outcome canvas that's provided by Person Happier and Miro. And it talks about problem statement, talks about an opportunity hypothesis, and talks about indicators and customer. Really simple. And in that, the product owner stands up to their peers and pitches and says why my idea is phenomenal, and you're very excited by it, and they sell it. So we introduced that for every quarter. The product owners had to fill out this one pager and say what was their big idea. And we tried it for a couple of quarters, and we got it more and more robust. And this last quarter, we introduced it, and over 40% of our company attended. And the product owner had to stand up there and go, this is my great big idea. And this is why I think this is super important. It was there. And we also added in a business user to really talk about the treatment. Because when you've got a business, the business users, systems, people they're talking, we've had actually external customers say about how much pain they've got. It brings the problem statement to life. And then all of a sudden, 40% of a company was allowed to unmute themselves and ask the product owner questions. Did they understand it? What was this? How was it going? And if you didn't know your stuff, those guys did, right? Because they live the company day to day. And they very quickly would spot a bad idea. It would just sniff it. Or they would sniff a great idea that the team didn't know well enough. And what it just created was this huge transparency and visibility of problem statements and opportunities and how we can solve them, and not executives saying here, focus here, rather bottom-up groundswell of problems and how it connected to our OKRs, our objectives and key results. So it's still connected to strategy, but bottom-up. And this outcome canvas really just gave us that ability in this pitching process. It was beautiful. And so to have 40% of the business now attending these, and we're going to try for a whole of company invite next quarter. It has been brilliant to see, and I would really love an opportunity for those of us in another meetup to really talking about this, because it's actually quite debatable. I've had some Agile coaches say, we don't like it because it suggests the product owner doesn't own their backlog. Well, we have seen the other side about the entrepreneurial concepts and how amazing it's been And I'd love to have a bit of a roundtable discussion with people if it's a valuable area. Because we see it as how you create entrepreneurial islands that are free to explore using OKRs as their boundaries and long-lived teams with missions to then explore what is valuable for them through this pitching process. And it's a real sugar high for those POs because they very quickly are super excited. So they do all of that. The business comes in and they vote. And then we as a product owner community, we then say, well, what are we going to do from that feedback? So we've ended up with some big statements backlogged. We've had other bits of work accelerated. We've had other outcomes pathed into experiments to do a bit more research because the business was saying, yeah, you're onto something, but you need to know, you need to do a wee bit more testing on this. And because we've got AWS and Appian as our main technologies there behind them, it meant we could just turn it into an experiment and quick build some stuff and really test and learn. And so the potential got completely unlocked with this process. And I really hope there is momentum for us to have a deep dive on pitching in a future session, because I think it's been really great for us to help us now not just work on pace, as we said, but value, because this is the entrepreneurial value concept. So we're working at pace, we're starting to learn about what's good and bad. And then we are now working on entrepreneurial and very value-based, and we're getting things into really kind of good concepts. But then we got asked a very important question. How do you reinvent governance and bring that into your Agile model? How do you make it a sustainable, repeatable, small series of islands that are working to have great Agile governance concepts? So the first thing you think of is Agile governance, and you go, right, there are two statements I don't often hear myself saying, as there. One seems very contradictory to the other. So what do you do? I know what I do. I jump on Google. Actually, if I was younger, I would jump on ChatGPT, but I jumped on Google, right? I'm too old. And if you ever Google Agile governance, you get screens like this. It's pretty scary. Like, honest to God, some of these models, these scaling Agile models, it's scary. And some of these diagrams and some of these tools and PPMCs that have rebadged themselves to be Agile tools, and oh man. So what do? As soon as you look at that, you probably do what I do, which was you've got you think of Warren, 3 boxes, in, out, too hard. Agile governance is without the one that goes in the too hard box, because that's crazy, that stuff. I can't get my head around that. We were really fortunate, though. We did not give up. And so we then said to ourselves, well, why is it successful? Why is traditional governance model working? Because if you understand the successes of it, it'll help you how do you redesign it for Agile in our eyes. So the first thing we looked at was, well, I had a previous company I worked for, and I was in a PMO at that time. And to get any idea up, the business case, the forms, the PowerPoints, it was huge. Like, there was appendices that had appendices of the appendices. There was spreadsheets that actually had links to sub-spreadsheets. And I remember the first time I did this in this very large organization, and I then get to page 72 of the main business case, and it would say, tell us about the benefit analysis, whatever, appendix 74. So I would write C appendix 742.9, because that's where all that information was in. The thing is, though, they then came back to me and went, no, people don't read appendices. So you need to actually write it in the main spreadsheet in form. And you're like, well, nobody's going to read it, why are you asking me to fill it in? And ultimately, it just built up bureaucracy in my eyes. But here's the thing, with all of those forms, business case templates, spreadsheets, appendices, stuff, it requires you to do mass stakeholder engagement. Now, mass stakeholder engagement means that everybody understands your idea. So you have full alignment in theory. So actually there's upside. Appendix 72.1.7 would actually then said, well, what is this model going to result you in? What's the benefits going to be? What is this new state going to deliver? And you had to therefore predict your future. Now, anyone in Agile will know that predicting future is not a great use case for Agile. And some of us would say you can never predict that future anyway, so what's the point? But actually, it helps on page 75 and all the spreadsheets, how it traces back to the corporate strategy team's strategy documents. And so then all of a sudden they could do this very simple trace and go, that makes sense. You can see why that predicting the future, how well does it align? And then it asks you to cost it out and understand all of this. So that's really beneficial too for the general counsel, because all of a sudden they know what the potential total costs are going to look like. Is it going to touch any APRA consents, etc., 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 or financial regulators, FSA in the UK, etc., etc. It could tell you all of that because you predicted the future, you've understood it all, and now you can go to all the right levels of delegation. So all in all, it kind of works. Like it does. I know it sounds terrible, but it does. It just doesn't work to solve the problems that Agile is trying to solve. And that is the key thing here. And so we didn't take the Warren approach. We kept going at it. And then what we said was, right, how are we going to do it? So I said to you, measure 2 for you is growing your network of this session. Why measure 2 is important is because first thing we did was then call up all the companies we knew, all the Agile coaches we knew, anyone that's in Agile, and said, hi, how have you tackled this problem? Because we've just done a Google and it scared us. Eventually, lots of them said, you know what, we just have still PMO governance, so we still have all of the stuff. We never really changed it. And so we saw, do we just do that? We just didn't feel it was right. So we kept looking and looking and looking. And eventually we met Marcus in 2020, and he put us on to different ideas. And one of them landed with a 2-day training course on Safer, Sooner, Happier. And that was brilliant for us because it allowed us to really understand the whole business agility context and lean control and get us there. And the key insight for us, we took this 2-day training course, finance people, line 2 risk management functions, governance, compliance. We took as many as possible into this 2-day training course so that we had a balanced view to lead us to a lean control standard. And if you only take in technologists, chances are you still won't quite get there either in our eyes, because it was the acceptance of finance and line 2 that meant that it was okay. And so you have to just constantly beg, borrow, and do everything to get them there. But that was the point that we then went to Miles to ask about lean control and helping us with that piece.
Thanks, Neil. And so when we're talking about governance here and lean control, Neil's been talking about 2 types of governance. In my book, there is the strategy governance. Are we heading in the right direction towards strategy? And that is where the OKRs and the pitching process, really helps. And then there is operational risk governance, which is, are we staying safe? Are we within regulatory guardrails? Are we considering all of the operational risks that we might have when we change stuff? And that's really where lean control is intending to help. If you mind moving on 1 page, please, Neil. So apologies for the words, you're probably reading them rather than listening to me, but the shift here, the one thing to take away is we're moving to a model of continuous governance. Okay, continuous integration, continuous delivery requires continuous governance. And before everyone freaks out and goes, oh my God, that sounds exhausting, this requires a new idea of governance, a new way of thinking about what governance means, because it doesn't mean preparing lots of papers and waiting for the meeting. It means a continuous engagement style of governance. The picture on the right here is an oil rig explosion that some of you may remember seeing on the news about a decade ago in the Gulf of Mexico. On the day that rig exploded, executives from the rig firm were on that rig celebrating 7 years without any incidents. And this was regarded as a safe rig. And you see the explosion that happened and the deaths that resulted. The investigation that followed looked at, was this actually a safe rig, or actually wasn't it? Was there a case of 7 years of incidents not being reported, of risks not being flagged, of bad news being buried because of the need for speed, and therefore the lack of psychological safety, the personal consequences if you were to call out problems, resulted in systemic risks building up, systemic weaknesses building up. And so when this thing went wrong, it was worse than it needed to have been. The fail-safe systems were not operational. So that is what the investigation concluded. Within a financial services context, within other service industries, you may feel, this is overly dramatic, but data leaks are the new oil spills, and cyber security is a critical priority for all organizations. So the need to maintain safety, the need for people to feel psychological safety is paramount. So my first key point on this page is, when rethinking your operational risk governance, culture is number one. Culture comes first. Culture matters ultimately. Yes, you need robust, auditable controls, but collaboration and culture comes first. The great thing that Neil's been talking about is, even right at the start, he's bringing in a cross-functional group of colleagues to training. And when I was asked to come and help at Helia, the first session I had was with the leadership team, who made time to talk about this topic, made time to care about it, and made sure that their teams were all engaged. So there was really fast engagement in that cultural alignment around, we need a new operational risk governance approach. Okay, so that's going to help. You need to it can't just be done from can't just be done from IT. Next then is whilst the ask started out as, we need an auditable process, actually the main job when trying to go about improving your process here is to communicate, talking to all those people, bring everybody into the conversation. We can provide a bit of a bootstrap from external, but what you'll need internally is to build the energy to keep that going. Once your third-party colleagues have gone, you have to be able to do that. And Neil did a great job of getting a couple of folk on it. Some of whom are on this call. Welcome, Ganesh there, we're really maintaining the cadence and of the communication sessions, of the engagements, and helping to support this from within. So very important to think of this as a product, as an internal product. Your new lean control process or approach you're going to follow, it's a product. It's going to have some tooling, it's going to have some policy, it's going to have some process, it's going to have some change internally, and you'll need to continually improve it. That's the way to think about continuous operational risk management. Next slide, please, Neil. What you're looking at on the screen here, this is a very brief intro about how it works. There's other stuff on YouTube around this, if you are interested. This is a funnel on its side. So this is the pitch process of OKRs happening. And as soon as it's decided which OKR is going to proceed, by the product team, that is a reason for the operational risk governance to start. What you see in the product team is 3 coloured dots at the top, and the team there is in the same colour. The product team has a leadership, and that's one of the foundational points here. So you've sliced value thinly. You've sliced value into quarterly OKRs, quarterly outcomes, call them whatever you like. So you're thinking small, so you can continually govern. You're not governing something massive, and you have some accountabilities in your product teams. The accountabilities that are already well established and are quite normal is the accountability for value. So that's the product owner type role that would normally exist. There's accountability for how the team operates, or Scrum Master or Agile team lead, that role normally operates. The third key accountability here is for technical excellence. And for teams that are trying to apply this governance in a digital context, you have to have that leadership role. So that was a place where there was some work needed initially to get those technical excellence leads identified, so that the right kind of technical governance can apply throughout this. So firstly, slice up value. Secondly, get the right leadership in place inside each of your product teams. Next click, please, Neil. As soon as that OKR is prioritized, then the product team is engaging with their safety team. The safety team is a cross-functional group of governance, risk and compliance colleagues. So fraud, security, architecture, there's a few other folk involved in that. And the first conversation is, let us tell you, let the product team, product owner, let us tell you, the safety team, what this OKR is that we're now going to be working on. There's no elaborated design yet. There's just a business intent. At that stage, the safety team can articulate, well, okay, given that's the context, this is how frequently we feel we need to be talking to you. Okay, so set an engagement level. That's an auditable moment. We've engaged, we've understood what's happening, we've decided a frequency to talk. Next click, please. From a product team perspective, the thing that's being talked about isn't just the OKR. There is a product context. So context matters all the time with continuous governance. So each product team has a wiki, a long-lived source of information, source of knowledge, where if there are any questions the safety team need to ask, they've probably been asked before. Data privacy, well, you probably put your data privacy impact assessment on your wiki already. If it needs to change as a result of this OKR, fine, that's on the product owner to make sure happens. Next click, please. From a safety team point of view, there will be many policies and standards in your organization that those safety colleagues are thinking about. And certainly Helia was no different to any other organization that I've seen. The ninja move here is to slice up those policies and standards into testable risk stories that can be placed into a risk catalog for reuse. And that means that it's much quicker when a risk is identified to pull that risk story and place it straight into the product team's backlog. If you could click one more, please, Neil. Typically, there might be some modification might be needed. So the risk could be the risk of malware, for example. There's a risk of malware because you're doing some data import. Okay, fine. So that's what context is this on cloud? What sort of scanning might we have? There might be some customization of that. It's sequenced before the relevant release when the malware risk presents itself. And that's part of the conversation. When will this need to be resolved? And then it can be confirmed back with the safety team owner that says, yeah, we're good. This is all mitigated well in advance of any kind of release event. So you can manage in the flow of work through the continual conversations you're having as that OKR evolves. You can make sure the operational risks are being managed as you go. Next click, please. Providing that's happening, there's a health measure that we established at each period. Neil's product owners are pulse checking the safety team members for each OKR to say, are we happy? Are we happy? Are we happy? Just to pulse check that these conversations are all working correctly. So these are becoming your auditable data points for how to manage your agile governance. Do you have your OKRs? Do you have your engagement? Do you have your frequency? Do you have your risk stories? Do you have your pulse checks on health? And providing that's all happening, then when it comes to release, the biz dev ops process is validating that there are no unresolved risk stories in the release. Otherwise, stop. And providing that's the case, then go. So you can be releasing at any frequency that the team is ready to sustain. And this can operate at slow or fast frequency. So in principle, this is the process lens. It only works if you have the collaboration working within it, hence why I start with culture. Underneath this picture, there are around 20 different auditable control items. And so there's a standard that would sit within this. And so the key thing that Neil was asking from me when we were trying to get this established was to tailor that standard for a size of organization appropriate to Helia, for the context of Helia, to make sure that it's simple and usable. So that's a very quick run through on what the lean control is. Neil.
Cool. And so when Miles left, he said, Neil, do not just stop the process. You need tooling. And you're a bit like, oh yeah, there's a consultant talking about tooling. Sure. Yeah. Very quickly, it actually was a consultant with experience that showed that tooling was super important. And so we were very lucky to have our cloud-based technologies that we could quickly build it. So we took the process and said, how is this going to work with tooling? Because we had a few gaps. So we built an OKR tool that helped us put all this in play. We built it ourselves, one, because I believe in entrepreneurial mindset, but two, because you're introducing lean control into this process, Those main tools are built in OKR. So you then have to have a separate tool for your lean control process, which didn't resonate with me. It was about integration. We had that connected into Jira, so that it could connect in so that you create an OKR, it will then push it into your product backlog and it can show there. Jira should be talking to your CI/CD tools. And then we built a release app on top of that that connected all that in and said, what release, what OKR does this connect into, what fixed version, etc. from Jira does it all connect into, and it's monitoring. So what did that look like? Just like any quick build tool we built, objectives, key results, every quarter, you could have up to 5 stars. We had started it with 3 stars of the quarter and moved up to 5 because our technology and operational area was such a big team that was there, so that we always knew what was super important about them. We have monthly check-ins about how the stars are going, what can we celebrate that was completed, and then what was off track that we help our teammates. So we built this kind of continual transparency, but continual support mechanism. And of course, every KR, you could kick off the lean control process. You could click a button and it'll move you into the risk assessment process. It'll kick the process all off. As soon as you hit save on that risk assessment, it immediately kicks off the calibration because it'll email the safety team so they know a meeting request is coming and they've got all the back data of the KR and what the product owner and technical owner really thinks are the gotchas. They've immediately filled with information. All of that, they can then use the evolutionary artifacts. They click a button and they then get it to see all the wiki that they can immediately self-serve in. And so as soon as a team is associated with Agile governance, it all pops up for them to complete. We've still got quite a bit to go in our vision on this element so that it's a one-stop shop for the safety team. We've got to do some dashboarding work really in there to get this all really one-stop shoppy. Right now, the safety team are telling us that they're going into Jira, Confluence, our OKR tool. They're going in a few places, so we need to create a one-stop hop for them. But the release app then we then built then said, what's this release? Connect it into the Jira process, connect that release into OKR so we can show what's the value that they're doing it. If any of you are in Australia, you might be familiar with ITGCs, the governance, the general controls that are checked about in annual accounts. So is the segregation, is it being successful, is the data fixes? And so it can very quickly just filter and show you all this super visually. And it creates attestations. So immediately says, there's been a deployment as per that diagram that Mel has walked you through. And it will immediately say, you need to now attest to this. You need to make sure you're comfortable with this. Here's all the information that we've subsumed from Jira and there. And it's just constantly listening into all the different deployments that happen to production and asking what's all the linkages. So what did all that do? And so like, I went very quickly through tools. If any of you looking at tooling is something to do, ping me on LinkedIn, message me, and I'll show you in more detail. There's nothing hidden. I'm just trying to show you it kind of quickly. What did lean control do when we introduced it? It actually did some weird things. It supported FOMO, because all of a sudden, we're working at pace and at value, and now all of a sudden, it's now a reimagined risk and governance process as well. We've reimagined so much here. Other teams are then going, I want to be part of this. This seems pretty cool. And all of a sudden, it was no longer just our division that was now part of this. It's now other divisions are jumping on board. All of a sudden, because it's safe, it's no longer those crazy folk over there doing this Agile stuff. It's just part of the bread and butter of your management system and your ways of working now. All of a sudden, this lean control artifact just built a lot of organizational safety. It then started popping up in HR annual goal settings, or annual results started referencing Agile. All of a sudden, it's just this sort of self-propagating model that just happens. We had an audit finding, and we went to our executive audit council. My boss and I were then, the CEO was about to whack us, what she should do with an audit finding. As soon as I said, it's a risk story, But it's in our backlog and we're on it, and here's the timeline and here's the link to the CEO. She immediately felt comfortable because the risk as work concept just really resonates, because it just means that everything is workable. Everything, whether it's a user story, a risk story, it's just work that we do as part of our day-to-day. Comfort organizationally, or risk stories is risk as work really lands, which saved me getting whacked and my boss got whacked. Well, my boss then did still whack me. But look, also all of this that were happening then gave me the confidence to then scale that pitching process to maybe 2/3 of the organization for the invite. And it's given me the confidence to go even further. It's also giving our leadership team confidence to explore our Agile squads into other areas that we didn't really envisage touching, because we knew it's now part of an ingrained way of the business. It's just part of our way we work. And all of a sudden, we can confidently scale out this model to anywhere in the organization, because it's referenceable with all of this material now. And it really gives you some good confidence. So I want to make sure we get time for questions. It's the key thing here. The golden thread for you in our story is OKRs to risk as work to attestations. That follows that golden thread. Why is the work valuable? Risks associated with that work, turning it into just your usual Kanban, risk as work. Do something in production, attest to it. If you have that lineage, you have decision matrices not needed, you don't need councils and advisory boards because they're not needed, because it's all in that trace. That's your golden thread. And that golden thread allows you to link governance to strategy to delivery, and the tooling gives you that complete transparency. That's been our story so far. We've still got so much to go on our journey. We were only scratching the surface. So I want to make sure that we've got a long way to go. As Miles said, there's lots of great videos on that in more detail. And those change agents, people like Ganesh, just make this stick. You can't just start it and move on. It's got to stick in your organization. So that's a really important angle to get. And that's where we are so far, and we're excited with what the remains of this year and next year will take us to. But Lean Control has really helped us have sustainable speed.